Merci. Thank you very much. I should, by way of introduction, point out that neither ICSSPE nor I are based in the UK. I'm paid for by the generosity of the German government, my salary, and ICSSPE is based in Berlin, the world's sexiest city, as I feel I have to tell everyone. If you're paid by the German government, it's actually in your contract that you tell everyone when you meet them that Berlin is the world's sexiest city. So yes, I'm going to be talking about using evidence or promoting evidence within the context partly of the PASS project, which has been really fascinating in terms of the different sectors that are involved. And I think if there was any lesson from, the strongest lesson from the first group of presentations, for me, the strongest message was we have to think seriously about multi-sectoral work, because physical activity cuts across education and health and business and policy, economics, local communities and so on. And that's been really fascinating for the PASS project. The other thing the other real lesson I've had in recent years has been from my work with Design to Move. Design to Move is a partnership between Nike, ICSSPE, the International Council of Sports Science and Physical Education, and the American College of Sports Medicine. And it has attempted to be a game changer, in that lovely American terminology, to, if you like, to shift the gears, to use the bicycle metaphor of the physical activity debate, by targeting policymakers. And because it's been driven by Nike, that are a selling company, the level of professionalism in marketing, in branding, in promotion has been of a standard that I'd never experienced before. I was the main scientific author for that material, working with their design department, their marketing department, has been literally an education. It's kind of changed everything. So I'll talk a bit about that as well. And obviously, if you have any questions, you feel free to ask either at the end, or if I say something that makes no sense at all, just give me a confused look and I'll try and explain a bit more. So these are the three topics for my brief presentation. Why do we need evidence? This is one of my pet hates, is the tendency in modern culture to say, well, it's all just a matter of opinion, isn't it? Well, no, it really isn't. It isn't just a matter of opinion. I feel compelled also to apologise for Brexit on behalf of my whole country of origin, the UK. One of the government ministers famously said, experts, well, should we be listening to them? Yes, we should be listening to them, you idiot. That's why they're experts. But there is definitely a culture in the modern world of Facebook, of internet memes, where evidence is treated with the same weight as a very well-designed meme picture. We need to be aware of these things. What do we know? I'll talk relatively briefly about this. My critical comments earlier on probably came across as too critical. I think we know a lot. There's still a lot more we need to know about physical activity. Among ourselves, my view is we should be honest about what we know and what we don't know. When we're trying to persuade people, for the case of physical activity, there is no doubt the case has been made. I think that's the simple truth. And then some ideas that I've learned from these various different projects about communicating it. Everyone claims to be basing their policies on evidence. Everyone does. The European Commission talks about to ensure the development of relevant policies and effective initiatives, the European Commission needs to develop a sound evidence base. Who can argue with that? Of course it's got to be evidence-based. You can go to almost every country in the European Union, around the world, the case is made that policies need to be evidence-based. If you ask a second question, such as, can you please show me where a policy has been based on evidence, that's normally followed by a long embarrassed silence. Because we know from studying policy development that in fact it is not from the ground up that policies normally develop. They're normally for financial reasons or because individual politicians or leaders or groups of communities have a feeling, a sense of commitment to a certain cause. And then evidence is used afterwards to justify it. But that isn't evidence-based practice. Evidence-based practice would be, for example, that we have a rising tide of non-communicable diseases in the world. It is taking significant numbers of lives. It is shortening lives. What are we going to do about it? The action needs to be based on evidence. That would be an evidence-based strategy. So that requires evidence, but not just any evidence. It requires quality evidence. And this is one of the tensions between researchers and practitioners. Practitioners or advocates sometimes say, well, just give us the information. And the researchers say, well, it's very complicated. Well, just give us something. Well, it's a bit more complicated than that. We're moving together, but probably not fast enough to the point where researchers understand what practitioners need and practitioners understand the complexity of the researcher situation. But unless we reach that point of connection, we're just going to be shaking our heads and moaning about how difficult the other side is. Well, of course, we're not on different sides. We're on the same team. These are some of the things that keep me awake at night with anger. For example, a Hollywood movie was produced recently, Lucy, based on the premise that we use 10% of our brains. And if only we can work out a mechanism for using the other 90%, then you would be essentially a whole human being or superhuman. If you use 10% of your brain, you're dead. The definition of brain death is 25% of brain functioning, so this is lower than death. Surveys suggest that in Europe, between 60 to 70% of people believe there's some truth that we use just 10% of our brains. It's simply a fiction. It's so obviously not true, but most people believe it. Did you know that you need to drink 8 glasses of water every day for health? That's not true either. That was invented by a journalist in the 1960s. Did you know that some of us are visual thinkers, some of us are auditory thinkers, we listen with or learn with our ears, and some of us are kinesthetic thinkers, and if you have a problem at school, it's probably because you're not being taught through the most appropriate method. That's not true either. Did you know that vaccines are full of poisons that kill children? Now that's not just a lie. I live in Berlin, where measles has reappeared because of that lie. This kills children. But if you're on Facebook, I guarantee you've received a message like this through your Facebook page. It is not true, and it's killing people. But because of the modern era in which knowledge is free and cheap, this information passes on. On my health insurance in Germany, I can get homeopathy. Homeopathy is water. That is the only ingredient in homeopathy. I can get water on health insurance. Not a bottle of water, that would be quite good for me. A tablet of water. This is an insane world we live in, where evidence is becoming so corrupted that people cannot tell the difference between truth and falsity. So scientists come along, making the case for physical activity to policymakers, and our voice is heard in the same din as homeopaths or anti-vaccine campaigners. We've got to do 2 things, it seems to me. One thing we've got to do is we've got to learn what they do, because they're really good at pushing that information. And secondly, what we've got to do is we've got to learn to differentiate the truth from the lies. What do we know? We know all sorts of things. The design to move, that's an appalling picture, but you'll have to take my word for it. Me just talking about truth and bullshit, and then I put a picture you can't possibly read. There's an irony there, isn't there? Never mind. Design to Move did a worldwide review of the benefits of physical activity, and it's continuing. We're continuing to publish reviews out of this. The latest publication was a review of the relationship between physical activity and educational grades published in the journal Sport and Society. And the conclusion reached was there is compelling reason to believe that regular physical activity is associated with improved educational performance. The Design to Move identified 6 broad areas: physical development, emotional development, individual life skills, soft skills development, academic development, financial development. Physically active children earn more. Physically active children perform better in the job market. Even people who are not physically active and lie on their application form perform better than people who don't lie. Even the language of physical activity in sport adds value to your application. These are compelling findings. And as I hinted before, in my opinion, we're not even close to realising the ultimate power of these things. Truthfully, I'll tell you my position. Physical activity improves the functioning of the human being. It is not a physical thing, it is a system thing, and therefore we probably don't know what we don't know. Because the more research we do, the more surprising facts are being thrown up. If you look at one of the most impressive documents in recent years came out of the Lancet magazine, a medical journal, a group of world-class academics in physical activity and public health try to find out what we know about physical activity around the world. What are the levels of physical inactivity by region? Now, this is the adult population, okay? We have to bear in mind, we really do not know how active children are around the world. We have lots of national studies, but we don't have a universal assessment yet. 43% of people in the Eastern Mediterranean are inactive to the point that it's damaging their health. If we look at just Europe, 34% of people are inactive to the point that they're damaging themselves in terms of coronary heart disease, cancers, type 2 diabetes, and a whole host of other conditions. It's a cause for concern. The World Health Organization currently suggests that physical inactivity is the 4th leading risk factor for non-communicable diseases. I would suggest that that's wrong. The latest data from the Lancet published this year suggests it's at least as harmful as smoking. At least as harmful as smoking. That would make it, I believe, the 2nd highest risk factor for coronary heart disease. There will come a point when politicians realise the urgency of this agenda. This is the Eurobarometer. Make of it what you will. The good news is the European Commission, or European Union, whichever one, I lose track now, I've left Europe, includes physical activity as one of its measurements, which is an amazing achievement, really amazing achievement. The problem is, it's a blunt instrument. If I ask you now how physically active you are over the last week, you might lie to me, or you might tell me the truth. The evidence says you'll lie to me, because you're human, and all humans lie about stuff like that. Likewise, if I say too much, how much alcohol did you drink? How much fatty food did you drink? It's just one of those things that we do. It's not a conscious thing. We overestimate good things we do. If you believe me, when I was talking to my family last week, I've basically eaten a fruit shop last week. I've just all I eat is fruit, never drink beer, exercise every day. It's just one of those things that humans do. So it's a blunt instrument, but it's an important instrument. This question, how often do you exercise or play sports? Never, never. So it is becoming tiresome to repeatedly say how wonderful it must be to live in Denmark or Finland or Sweden or Slovenia. Oh, it's boring. But the reality is, good job, good job. If, however, you look at Bulgaria, Malta, Portugal or Romania, I'm not going to ask anyone if they're in this room, if they're from one of those countries, but I went to Portugal recently for a physical activity event, and you would literally take your life in your hands if you cycled in the city. In London, where I come from, cyclists are called organ donors, because if you cycle in central London, at some point you're going to end up in hospital. That's the truth of it. If you're in Berlin or Copenhagen, it's easier to cycle around the cities. It's simply built into the structure. One thing we take from this, of course, is vast differences between countries in physical activity opportunities. What about this? What about other opportunities to be physically active? Cycling from one place to another, dancing, gardening. Rather disappointingly, let's groan, Sweden, Denmark, Netherlands, Finland, Slovenia. Yeah, I was a school teacher in the past. This is what we call like the annoyingly well-behaved child. You kind of think, I'm glad they're in my class because they make life a bit easier, but they are slightly smug. You know, smug is that kind of, yeah, I live in Slovenia, we cycle everywhere. Portugal, Malta, Cyprus, Bulgaria at the bottom again. These things are cultural, obviously, as much as environmental. We also know, I did a review for the World Health Organization some years ago, and we reviewed every study available on physical activity between boys and girls, women and men. Every single study in 2004 found that men were more physically active than boys. Men were more physically active than women, boys are more physically active than girls. There have been 2 studies that have found no difference. One in Portugal, and that's probably because both of the groups were very, very, very low levels, and one in Finland, which is more interesting, where their levels were very, very, very high. What is it that Finland's doing? Did you see the report last week or 2 weeks ago? Finland now is introducing a policy of 3 hours every day physical activity for children. 3 hours a day. And we also know as people get older, they get less physically active. The cutting point seems to be around 12 or 13. If you think, oh, when you get older, when I get to 40 or 50, I'm going to start getting inactive. No. 14 or 15, you start getting inactive. That's quite a serious decline from quite an early age. These are predicted obesity rates in 2030 from the World Health Organization. 41% of the United Kingdom population would be obese by 2030, compared to, well, you can read, I won't go, but compared to Sweden, 11%. Oh, I just hate Sweden. The other thing I hate about Sweden is they're like really nice people as well. It just compounds the misery of going to Sweden. Couldn't they just be really awful? So what do we do about it? Well, as I said at the beginning, we've got to start thinking about communication. We've got to start thinking about making messages stick. This is called the success strategy. It's from a book called Made to Stick from an American, 2 brothers. It's the most sensible thing I've read on a subject full of nonsense. Marketing. Basically what these 2 brothers, the Heath brothers, say is, if you want to put across messages that stick, and what they mean is that stick in somebody's head like an earworm that gets into your brain and doesn't get out again, it's got to be simple. Could we be accused of offering an overly complex argument for physical activity in the past? Definitely we could. Definitely. 1 hour a day of physical activity for children is almost certainly wrong as a physical activity guideline. It's not enough. But 1 hour a day is memorable and simple, and it's a step towards the target. It's very, very clever. It's just not enough. Unexpected. How many of you don't need to tell me, but were you surprised if I said to you that children who are physically active, or even pretend to be physically active, earn more? If you weren't, pay attention, because that surprised the hell out of me when I first read it. It never even occurred to me. But it's true. Were you surprised when you learned that children who are physically active at school perform the equivalent of a grade better in their exams? These things are really significant, and they grab policymakers' attentions. Concrete things, 1 grade higher. Did you know that physical inactivity is so serious among children that they're at risk of having a shorter life of up to 5 years? That's a concrete claim. This is the first generation of children in recorded history who will have a shorter life expectancy than their parents. That is a concrete fact. Fact. Credible. If I said to you that physical activity could solve world peace, probably not very credible. But at some point, some physical educationist has claimed it, because they claim everything. I speak as a physical educationist. There came a point where we said, improve computer skills, we can do that. Literacy, we can do that. Numeracy, we can do that. The irony is, numeracy and literacy do improve with physical activity. Emotional. I'll come back to that in a moment, actually, because emotional is the one that we maybe feel less comfortable about. But that is powerful, because most decisions by politicians are not based on reason. They're based on feeling. And then stories. Can we build stories into people's...
Can I suggest if you wrap up your presentations in 2 to 3 minutes?
I am going to do that.
We really want to hear from our other speakers. It's
Really?
fascinating. Absolutely.
I have to say, before Brexit, I never used to get this. There's a lot of aggression coming across the English Channel. Anyway, to wrap up. Sorry. There isn't. These are some of the marketing campaigns from Design to Move. The point I'm putting across: simple, concrete messages to put across these things that we know with some confidence to be true. The world has stopped moving. And just to reiterate what I said a moment ago, first generation to have a shorter life expectancy than their parents. That is an emotional claim, and it is supported by the evidence. The first 10 years of life create a critical window for physical activity. We have to make children active every single day. Is it literally the first 10 years of life? No, of course it isn't. Children, human development doesn't celebrate birthdays, but the first 10 years of life is an easy, measurable, simple, memorable fact. And this is my last thing before Maxine throws something at me. Whether you can hear it or not, this is the campaign that went out on American television to see if you can think about the success criteria and how this might fulfill it.
I probably would make a time machine. I would make medicine for the sick. I'd probably invent something new.
我会赢到5个总篮球戒指。
If I could have an extra 5 years to live. You said 5, right? 5 years. It's a long time.
I would try to fix everything I did bad.
I would bring my uncle back because I'm listening. I would get more hamsters. I would probably want to go looking for dark matter. I think I'd go looking for aliens. If I could live an extra 5 years,
I was thinking about making like a helicopter, like a wooden helicopter. But I don't have any wood. I want to go check out the moon sometime.
I'd probably teach my sister not to hate tuna. I would try and invent a machine that lets you learn at light speed. If I had 5 more extra years to live, I would be the boss of all the chipmunks. Eu cantaria na frente de 1 milhão de pessoas. I don't really know. I think I'd do anything. Why are you asking me that?
Sorry about that. So, yes, if we're going to win this battle, which is a life or death battle We need evidence, we need communication strategies, and we need to do it together. And it seems to me that those three things are what, I'm a philosopher by background, Willis philosophers call necessary conditions. If we lose any of those, it won't work. So thank you very much, and apologies.